Okay, I'm blue and I go first. So let me roll a die. Okay, 3. So let's see. Here's a picture of a swan. So that must be science and nature, right? No, it's sports and leisure. So this fish, that must be science and nature. History? Okay, so all the designs are just for decoration. So I just rely on the colors. What's pink again? Entertainment? Is that like a theater, or is that movies, or is that drinking, or what is entertainment? Just general entertainment? Okay, I'll try that. Ah, Yellow, what a lucky roll. I wish I could steal that category from you and win the game. Oh, come on, Yellow, I know you know the answer to that question. Now I really wish I could steal it from you. Good guess, Yellow. You win the last piece of the pie. Good game, Yellow, I guess. It took us a while. We rolled that die a lot, and you sure did get lucky on that last turn. I just wish there was a new and interesting trivia game we could play, something other than Trivial Pursuit. Maybe Board Game Review with Jason has a suggestion. Let's see. Board Game Review with Jason.blogspot.com. Oh, we're in luck. Here's one called Bezzerwizzer. Funny name, but let's see what it's about. Welcome to Board Game Review with Jason. This is a video podcast where I take a board game, show you how to play it, give you my personal review, and then give you some decision points so you can decide if it's a game you would like to check out. In this episode, we're looking at a game with a funny title. It's called Bezzerwizzer. It was designed in Denmark in the year 2006-2007 by Jesper Bülow, and it comes to us in the United States recently published by Mattel. It's a trivia game for 2 to 4 players or teams. The box says it's for adults, but I would recommend it for ages 12, 14, somewhere around there and up. It'll take you about 45 minutes or an hour to play. The subtitle of the game says it's a game of trivia, tactics, and trickery. At its heart, it's a trivia game like you might be used to, where you're asking and answering questions and moving around a board trying to get to the finish line first. But it's also a game of tactics and trickery, where it employs some interesting mechanics about how you move around the board and allows you to play to answering questions in categories that you're strong at. It's also more interactive and confrontational than trivia games that you may be used to. All the players are more involved than in your traditional trivia game, and it's a little more confrontational. So let's open up this box and see what you get with the game. So here's what you get with the game. You get a small main playing board, which is really just a track of 20 spaces around which you're going to be moving your player tokens as you answer questions correctly. And the goal is, you start here in this corner, and the goal is to move around the board and get back to where you started from. Each player or team gets a smaller category board, and this board just has 4 spaces that are ranked from 1 to 4. Each player or team also gets 2 B tiles in their color, or Bezzerwizzer tiles, and they also get a Z tile or Swap tile. Then there are these 20 category tiles. Yes, there are 20 categories in this game. And then you get the box of cards, question cards, but you also get a reference card for each player or team showing the categories of questions with the icons and the name of the category. So there are 4 of those. And then the rest of the cards are the question cards. Each card has 20 questions on it, 1 in each category. And then on the flip side, you have the answers to the questions. Then you get a cloth bag that these category tiles will be going into to draw out during the game. It sort of randomizes which categories come into play during the game. And finally, you get a rules sheet. The rules for the game are actually just on one side, but the other side is mainly just another reference chart for the categories of questions that come up during the game. So those are the components you get with the game. Let's see how you set it up and get ready to play. So to set up the game for play, you lay out the boards like you see here. You put the player pieces on the start location. Each player takes their board and their 2 Bezzerwizzer tiles or their swap tile. Then each team places one of their colored tiles, let's say the swap tile, into the bag, and then somebody draws out one of the tiles to see which player or team goes first. So in this case, the blue player or team would go first. Then you take all of the tiles back out of the bag and give them to their respective players or teams. And then you put all of the category tiles into the bag, shuffle them up, and then each player or team is going to draw 4 category tiles. Then each player or team is going to take a look at which 4 category tiles they drew from the bag. So in this case, the green player or team drew music, politics, language, and business world. And the player or team has to decide which of these categories they're stronger at and which one they're weaker at. So the green player or team may be really strong in music, so they would place the music tile here in the space with 4 dots. 4 dots means you're more confident, 1 dot means you're less confident. So the green player team may not be so good at politics, so we'll put the politics in the 1 space. Probably their next strongest would be business world and then language, like so. So each player is taking the 4 categories they drew and ranking them based on how strong they feel they are in questions from those categories, with 1 being the weakest and 4 being the strongest. The other players or teams have done the same thing, prioritizing the categories that they drew from the bag. So I'm first going to show you the basic flow of play, that is without considering these Bezzerwizzer and swap tiles, and then we'll come back and see how these tiles come into play. So the basic flow of play of the game is that you start with the start player, and that was decided when we drew out one of the color tiles. So the blue player is asked the question and gives an answer, and if the answer is correct, then the blue player gets to move forward 1 space. The 1 space corresponds to the 1 dot on the lowest priority category space. After they've answered the question, they turn the tile over to signify that they've answered the question. Play then proceeds clockwise around, so the red player would go next, and someone would ask the red player a question from their lowest priority category, which is science. If the red player got it right, they would get to move forward 1 space. So this continues around the table. Green gets a chance to answer in politics, yellow gets a chance to answer in art and stage, and then it comes back to the blue player, and the blue player gets asked a question in the 2nd priority spot. If the blue player gets this question correct, they get to move forward 2 spaces. So you get the idea. The number of spaces you move forward is determined by how high a priority you've ranked the category. So you could get to move from anywhere from 1 space all the way up to 4 spaces. You get to move forward 4 spaces if you answer your highest priority question correctly. So now let's talk about the tiles and the special abilities that they give you. The very first thing you can do on your turn is play the swap tile if you haven't already. The swap tile allows you to swap any 2 categories on the board. It can involve your categories, but it doesn't have to. One example is that I could say, well, you know, I think I'm a little bit stronger in technology than I thought I was, so I might swap technology and film. So I've swapped 2 on my own board. Another alternative is that I could swap one of my tiles with any other players. So I might say, hey, you know that yellow player over there has architecture at the level 4. I could swap my TV and film at level 2 with his architecture at level 4. Another alternative is that I don't have to include my tiles at all. I could be extra mean and say, I know that yellow is good at architecture, and I know that green is good in music, but I could swap them between those two players. Now yellow or green may have a category in their number 4 spot that they're not confident in any longer. Once you've played the swap tile, you turn it over and it can no longer be played for this round of play. The other 2 tiles are the Bezzerwizzer tiles. You don't play these on your own turn, but you play them on other players or team's turn. So for example, it's currently the blue player or team's turn. They're about to be asked a question in the TV and film category. Before the question is even read, the yellow player could play one of their Bezzerwizzer tiles. The blue player is then asked the TV and film question. If the blue player gets it right, they get to move forward the 2 spaces as usual. If they get it wrong, however, is when the yellow Bezzerwizzer tile comes into play. Before the answer is given, the yellow player offers their answer. So if the blue player gets it wrong, but the yellow player gets it right, then they get to move forward 3 spaces. The yellow player could also wait until the TV and film question is asked, and after the question is asked, the yellow player could still play their Bezzerwizzer tile. But if the blue player gets it incorrect and the yellow player gets it correct, then the yellow player only gets to move up 1 space instead of 3 spaces. The danger in waiting until the question is asked, though, is that another player, say the green player, may play the Bezzerwizzer tile first before the question is asked in hopes of getting to move forward 3 spaces instead of 1. But the player or team who played the Bezzerwizzer tile only gets to move forward if the current player answers incorrectly and they answer correctly. If you play a Bezzerwizzer tile, whether it's before or after the question is read, if the current player gets it incorrect and the player who played the tile gets it incorrect, then the player who played the tile has to move back 1 space. But notice that the current player never has to move back 1 space if they get their question incorrect. Note that you can't move back from the start space. Like the swap tile, though, once you play a tile, whether you get it correct or incorrect, it's turned over and cannot be played again for the rest of the round. However, you do have 2 Bezzerwizzer tiles to play during the round. So that's the flow of play. You just keep going around the table. So once you go around the table 4 times, all of these tiles will be flipped over. You won't be able to win the game in 1 round of play. But at this point, when all of the players or teams have answered questions in their 4 categories, you put all of the category tiles back in the bag, and then each player or team draws 4 fresh new categories and arranges them on their player board as described before. You also get to turn back up your special swap and Bezzerwizzer tiles, as this is a new round, and so with these new categories out on the board, you'll get a chance to swap and Bezzerwizzer and challenge all over again. The last thing to talk about is the finish line, these spaces leading up to the end with dots in them. So at some point you may have a leader who's in the finish line, say the blue player, and the other players are trying to catch up. Let's say it's the blue player's turn to be asked a question in the TV and film category. The green player decides to throw in their Bezzerwizzer special tile before the question is asked. The blue player gets it incorrect, but the green player does get it correct. Normally they would get to move their playing piece forward 3 spaces. An alternative they have is if the current player is in the home stretch or the finish line, instead of moving your own piece forward 3 spaces, you can move the piece in the finish line back the 3 spaces or the bonus spaces. You can do that whether you throw in the Bezzerwizzer tile before or after the question is read. So you keep going until one player or team gets back to the start space for a complete round of play. If they're the only one there, after that complete round of play, they win. If more than one player manages to get there within the same round of play, then you have a tiebreaker between those 2 players or teams. Those 2 players or teams are asked questions alternatively, and the first player or team to get it correct wins the game. So I want to go over the Bezzerwizzer flow of play one more time and bring everything together. So the first thing you do on your turn is look and see if you've played your swap tile or not. If you have not, and you look on the board and you see two categories that you want to swap, then you can play your swap tile and swap any two categories on the board. They don't have to involve categories on your player board, but they can. So once you play the swap tile and swap the categories, the swap tile is then out of play. You can't play it again for the rest of the current round. So then the non-current player or team decides if they want to play an available Bezzerwizzer tile. This is before the question in the category is asked. If someone does and they're the first to throw it in, then they play their Bezzerwizzer tile and the challenge space is 3. That means they'll get to move forward 3 later on if they get the bonus spaces. Then the current player or team is asked the question in their next lowest ranked category. And then after the question is read, if a Bezzerwizzer tile has not been played yet, the non-current player or team, if they want to, can play a Bezzerwizzer tile after the question is read. In this case, the challenge spaces or the bonus spaces you'll get is only 1 instead of 3 because the question has been read. So then the current player or team offers their answer to the question that was asked. And then if a Bezzerwizzer tile has been played, then the player or team that played the Bezzerwizzer tile offers their answer. This is before the answer to the question is given. So then the person who's asking the question sees if the current player or team answered the question correctly. If they did, then the current player or team gets to move forward the number of spaces equal to the current category's ranking. Then play continues clockwise, and the next player becomes the current player or team. But if the current player or team did not answer correctly, and a Bezzerwizzer tile was played on the board, then you have to look and see if the tile playing team's answer is correct. If the tile playing team's answer is correct, then they get to move forward the number of challenge spaces. So that depends on if they played it before or after the question. If they played it before the question was read, then they get to move forward 3. If they played it after the question, then they get to move forward 1. An alternative they have is that if the current player team is in the home stretch, then instead of moving their playing piece forward, they can move the current player team's piece back the number of challenge spaces. But if the tile playing team's answer was incorrect, then they have to move their piece back 1 space. Again, this is regardless of whether they played it before or after the question was read. So if a Bezzerwizzer tile has been played and the current player or team answered incorrectly, whatever the case is, it all comes back to the play of the current player moves clockwise, and you do it all over again, starting with looking at the next players. Do they want to play the swap tile? Have they played the swap tile or not? So what do I think about this game? Well, I like it for the most part. I have a couple of issues with it, and I'll get to that in a second. But first, the reason why I got this game. Was because I was looking for a fairly traditional trivia game, but employed several different mechanics that made it interesting and new. And this game certainly does that. It fits the bill there. As far as pricing and availability, it's easily available. It's readily available. You can go find it at Walmart or other such stores. You can also go online and find it. So a variety of places to get it, and it only costs about probably 30 bucks maximum. So I think it's well worth the price for what you get. As far as the components go, I really like the components. The tiles are thick and they play well. They hold up to repeated play. They pass around well. So I really like the tiles that come with the game, and also the player pieces. They're tall, so it's easy to just go out and grab them and move them around the board. The board is pretty simple. There's not really a lot of theme going on here, but I like that because you're concentrating on the the mechanics, and it's just a trivia game. So you're not trying to paste on some kind of wild theme that doesn't really apply to a trivia game. So as far as the question cards, they're pretty good. There are 20 categories, and they all go on one card. So the questions are pretty small. So if you have trouble with your eyesight, that might cause a bit of a problem. But you know, it's okay. The questions range in various levels of difficulty. Some are easy, some are quite challenging. This brings me to the first major problem I have with the game, and that is when you go to ask a question, you're looking on someone's playing board and seeing what category of question you need to ask them. So you look at their tile, for example, the TV category tile, and it shows a picture of a television set here. And you try to look on your question card, and it's kind of funny when I play this game with people who haven't played this game before. I'm always surprised how long it takes them to find the TV screen on the question card. And I looked at it a little more carefully, and I noticed the reason why. And if you notice on the category tile, the TV screen is black, whereas on the question card, the TV screen is white. So the black and white colors are inverted between the category tile and the question cards. So that makes it a little more difficult to find the category on the question card until you get used to the locations on the question card. The rules sheet it has, like I said, it had the category reference sheet on the front. It gives you a little more detail about the kinds of questions that are going to come up, and then the actual rules of the game are just on the back side. It's really straightforward to play this game. The instructions are well written, it's easy to understand, so good job on the rules. So overall with the components, I think they're really nice. The only problem I have is with the finding the category of question on the question cards until you get used to their relative locations. As far as setup time goes, it's not bad, and the reason it's not bad is because part of the game is in setup. You know, when you're drawing your category tiles and ranking them on your playing board, you're setting up the game, getting ready for the first round of play. And I really like that in a game where during setup, part of the game is during setup. As far as the flow of play of the game, I think it flows pretty well. For the first game or two, you might have to sort of go through that flow chart that I showed you and say, okay, the first thing I need to do is, do I need to play my swap tile? And then you ask, does anyone want to play a Bezzerwizzer tile before the question is asked? And then after the question is asked, you pause and say, does anybody want to play a Bezzerwizzer tile, at this point? Some people have complained about that in their reviews. I do find that is the case maybe with the first game or two, but you get used to it and it starts to flow better with your successive games. If you look on the board, there are 20 spaces to go around to get to the finish line. If you add up the number of points you can move, not taking into account the Bezzerwizzer tiles right now, but if you add up the points on your player board, they add up to 10. So that means, not thinking about the Bezzerwizzer tiles, you have to play 2 complete rounds answering all of your 4 questions correctly. Now you probably won't get all of your questions correct for 2 consecutive rounds, so you start bringing in the Bezzerwizzer tiles. Maybe you get a few points there. So it probably takes a minimum of 2 rounds, more likely 3 or 4, and sometimes 5 rounds for a winner to be decided. And that's the other problem I have with the game as far as the flow of play, is that it seems to take just a little bit longer than I would like. The recommended playing time is around an hour. In the games I've played, that's about what a game has come out to be, about an hour and 10 minutes or so. But I find it's about 10 or 15 minutes too long. When I'm ready for the game to be over, there's about another 10 or 15 minutes left to play for a winner to be declared. So I think it plays just a little bit long, but not too bad. It does scale well to the number of players because you can organize teams of up to 2 to 4 and play the game that way. And the flow of play and the strategy changes a bit when you have teams, because you not only think about what one person is strong at, but what the team is strong at. And finally, replayability. I think it's highly replayable. There are plenty of questions. There are plenty of categories. So you can play this game many times before you start getting to repeat questions. So I really like the game, but would it be a good game for you to check out? Well, that brings us to decision points. So I think the decision points on whether or not this game would be a good fit for you and your play group really boils down to two things. The first thing is the obvious one, trivia. Are you and your play group interested in trivia and interested in a trivia game that brings something new to the table? If you are, then I would recommend this game. The second decision point I would think about is the confrontational interaction between the players. You can look at the person who's in the lead and you can move their piece back some spaces, or even more frequently you can play your swap tile and pull the rug out from a person and steal their category that they put in their highest ranked spot. So if you're looking for a trivia game that's serious in the questions but more lighthearted and allows for this confrontation between players, and your team can handle that and be lighthearted about the way this trivia game is played, then I would recommend it. So that does it for this episode of Board Game Review with Jason. If you're a first-time viewer or haven't seen my previous episodes, I invite you to go check them out. You might find another game that might interest you. And also keep on the lookout for future episodes. You can find my videos and keep track of this video podcast on board games on YouTube at BGRWJ. There's a Facebook page, Board Game Review with Jason, you can go and like. There's the main blog, which is boardgamereviewwithjason.blogspot.com. And you can also subscribe to this podcast in iTunes. So I thank you for your time and watching this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. I'll see you next time.